The title is, of course, The Fifth Horseman. Didn't really know what Jeff was speaking about today, but I will be touching on something that I am finishing now, our Revelation series. This is the last in a series that I've been giving here for the last 2 or 3 months, and we will move on to something else. I'm giving another one on up in Vero Beach today. But I know I thought about this because I was reflecting back at a time. It's been 40 years ago. Am I on? I didn't turn it on? Yeah. I'm on. There we go. You thought it was me and it was you. I reflected back on a time over 40 years ago as a voracious reader of books. And I lived in Middle Tennessee, and right in Middle Tennessee is Stones River Battlefield. It's a famous battle that took place during the Civil War. I had been through the battlefield a few times, even did some work near the battlefield. And so I was always intrigued by battles and war, stories of the Civil War. And because I moved from Indiana when I was 9 years old to Tennessee, I was considered a Yankee. I was considered one of the bad guys in my class in Tennessee, and I would have people talk about various things and send me drawings of the North being defeated by the South. And as they would refer to the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression, I was intrigued. And I read a book that a friend of mine gave me. I read most of it before I had to give it back. And it was a true account of a Civil War. And that book was titled, I Rode with Stonewall. I Rode with Stonewall. It was a story of the life of a young man who served under Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson was a famous general in the Civil War. He was killed during the Civil War. But the young man's name was Henry K. Douglas. Henry K. Douglas. He was in his early 20s. He had finished law school right about the time of the war. He knew the area, and he entered the war at the start as just a private. Didn't know anything about soldiering or war. But because of his education and his work ethic, he became an officer very quickly. As a matter of fact, he went through the entire war and survived it, even though many of the men he served under didn't. He left the war as a major. He was shot or injured 6 times during the war in his 20s. He thought about writing a book because he was one that kept a journal. He'd write a journal every day of the Civil War. And so eventually his journals did turn into the book, I Rode with Stonewall. As he told the story, and I would recommend it as a read because it's very interesting historical book. He told not only the sad parts, the wicked part of war, but he also told the humorous would tell stories of how the men actually would try to find something to bring some levity into their lives as every day they would face the coming battles. But the most amazing part was how he talked about the generals, from General Lee to General Jackson to Jeb Stuart. He worked for all of them and was actually taken a prisoner of war towards the end and was exchanged for officers. He had an interesting life, to put it one way. But his stories were what made the book so intriguing, because you could actually picture yourself being there in war, in the bad times and the good times. Now, why do I bring this up? Because I reflected back as I was doing some study on war in the Bible. We see it scattered all through the Bible. Some of it is very interesting, and others not so. More vicious, more sad. But I want to look at, as we're going through Revelation, we have the opportunity, as we read about in Revelation 6, we have the opportunity to read about 4 horsemen. I'm talking about the 5th today. But the 4 horsemen, they're famous. You can read it in books. You can read it in the Bible. You can see stories. You can even see movies. As it talks about the first horseman riding a white horse. And it's about false religion, deception. The second horseman to ride is a red horse, pictured of war that is going to take place. Then you have the third, which is the black horse, which talks about famine. And then fourth horse is the pale horse, which talks about pestilence, death. And these 4 horsemen, as they're described in Revelation 6, also in Matthew 24, a dual count, talks about these things happening from the time of Christ. They've been going on for 2,000 years. These 4 horsemen have been riding. We've had false religions and deception. We've had war. We still have it. We have famine. We have pestilence. We have various things. But Christ talks about this, and John reveals this in the book of Revelation, that they will intensify. And they have intensified over the years to where they will reach their peak just before Jesus Christ returns. That's his words. That's what we find out. So what happens when he returns? That's what I want to cover today as I finish this series on Revelation. Because there is a 5th horseman. And that 5th horseman is Jesus Christ when he returns. I want to go through that because sometimes we don't really get the full story. And to me today, I want to give you the full story of that battle, of that war that is going to happen, just as young Henry Douglas was able to recount all the stories of the famous battles from Gettysburg to Antietam. We, if we follow Christ, if we are his, as the scriptures say, we will be in that battle, the final battle, with Jesus Christ as our general, just like Stonewall Jackson was Douglas's. So I want to look at that in a very short amount of time, because I think it fills in a lot of holes, because I will just be going to three separate sections of the Bible as it describes that day that Jesus Christ returns. So I will read from the New Living Translation first. I'd like you to turn to Revelation 19. Revelation 19, verse 11 says, "Then I saw heaven open." Well, then what? So he's saying then. What happens before then? You have to read the previous verses. in Revelation 19. There is a wedding. There's a wedding that takes place. And he describes it. He said, blessed are those who are take part in that wedding. It's the bride of Christ marrying Christ before God the Father. I have touched on that in previous messages, so I won't go through that. As a matter of fact, 9 says, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb. So we know what happens just before Jesus Christ comes down to finally bring peace to the earth. It's not a depressing message. It's a very inspiring one. Because if the world continues spiraling down to where it becomes survival of the fittest, and it has in various countries, let's go see what happens here. When, after the wedding supper, said, then I saw heaven opened, and a white horse was standing there. Its rider was named Faithful and True, as I read from the New Living Translation. For he judges fairly and wages a righteous war. So when Christ comes back, if you remember Matthew 24, it says, but for the elect's sake, no one would be left alive. So he has to come back because the world in the future is going to right to the end, to where the nuclear weapons will be, that we all fear will be released. There will be no one left alive. And that's not Jesus Christ's purpose for this earth. It's to bring in a righteous rule. It's to bring in peace as they've never seen it before. And so here, this general, our general, his eyes were like flames of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He was called the King of Kings in other scriptures. A name was written on him that no one understood except himself. What? What is that name? Why? Why is there a name that nobody understands but himself? Do you realize other scriptures in the minor prophets say that when he sets up his kingdom, that 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ, that there will be a new language, a pure language, and everyone will have a new name. It's a pure thing. Is that why John doesn't know it? I'm not saying. In verse 13, he wore a robe dipped in blood, and his title was the Word of God. Remember John 1:1? In the beginning was the Word. That was him. He was the Word. The armies of heaven dressed in, and get this, dressed in the finest pure white linen, followed him on white horses. From his mouth came a sharp sword to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron rod. He will release the fierce wrath of God, the Almighty, like juice flowing from a winepress. What's it saying? It's going to be very bloody. A lot of people are going to have to die. For him to bring peace to the world. That's what's going to happen. On his robe at his thigh was written this title, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Who are the kings? Is that me? No, I didn't bring my phone in. Must be one of you. Sound just like my phone. Maybe it's God calling. You better answer. On his robe at his thigh was written the title, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, or reflecting from the sun. He's not standing in the sun, but it's how John's trying to relate this. Shouting to the vultures, the buzzards, the eagles. You might have seen some at the dump over here. Anybody seen that? And you see them flying around. Okay, and sometimes there's hundreds, if not thousands of them just gathered and they're here to eat. Well, this is going to happen in the last days because the angel is telling the birds there's about to be carnage as never before. So come on, I'm going to give you something to eat. shouting to the vultures flying high in the sky, "Come, gather together for the great banquet God has prepared." See, this doesn't just happen. God knew this was happening. He's predicted this is going to happen. He's tried to warn people. He's tried to send his 2 witnesses to testify that all you have to do is change. And they don't do it. And so this has to happen. "Come and eat the flesh of kings, of generals, of strong warriors, of horses and riders, and of all humanity, both free and slave, small and great." Then I saw the beast and the kings of the world and their armies gathered together to fight against one sitting on the horse and his army. How do we see this? They have gathered, as you can read in other parts of the Bible, to a place called Armageddon, the final battle. And it's the governments of the world that are fighting for this prime place called Jerusalem, this holy land. And they are all brought there to fight the final war with all the nuclear, with all everything they ever have. And this is Satan's desire, to wipe out humanity. And so they gather at this valley to fight each other. But then an army from the sky comes. Are they going to think it's aliens? Perhaps. You know? I mean, you'd see people coming from the sky. And they turn to fight the enemy from above. And this is what it's describing here. Now, where was I? Yeah, then I saw the beast and the kings of the world, army sitting together, and to fight, sitting on the horse and his army. And the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who did mighty miracles on behalf of the beast. Miracles that deceived. Remember the first one? First horse? Deception, false religion. Deceived all who had accepted the mark of the beast and who worshipped his statue. Both the beast and the false prophet were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. Their entire army was killed by the sharp sword that came from the mouth of the one riding on the white horse. And the vultures all gorged themselves on the dead bodies. Okay, that's just in a few verses. It just shows, okay, it's over. That's all I get. Okay, it's here, boom, it's done. I wanted more. I wanted to hear more. Well, God doesn't just bring this up in one place, because the 5th horseman is Jesus Christ. And so I'd like to go, if you will, go with me to Zechariah 14. My second place I'll turn to today. Zechariah, because it describes this. And I'll be reading from the New King James Version here. Verses 1 through 12. Here it describes it a little bit better. Or fills in some of the blanks. Let's put it that way. Zechariah 14 verse 1. "Behold, the day of the Lord is coming." This is just before it happens. Who is Zechariah talking to? You can read through you can read the 13th chapter. His warning is to Jerusalem. It's to Israel. It's to Judah. It's to those living in the Holy Land. That's who he's been talking to, telling them to change and that trouble is headed their way. And so this goes to tell the story from their viewpoint. What if you are living in Jerusalem? What if you are living in the Holy Land at that time? We're about to read what you're going to encounter, or what those people are going to encounter. It said, "Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, and your spoil will be divided in your midst, being you're in trouble. Everything you have, somebody else is going to take it." When armies come in to capture a city, and these armies have all gathered outside of Jerusalem to capture it, Might even remember that the two witnesses in chapter 11 are actually killed in the holy city, and that's where their bodies will be laid out. So this city has been captured, the holy city. For I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. They all want it. Why? Why do they want it? Let you think on that. The city shall be taken. Means the walls, it's captured. It's overrun. The houses rifled. And the women ravished. It says in the New Living Translation, the women are raped. The spoils of war. They've won. They've taken the city. It's a literal city of hell with what is taking place. And we get the picture here. Half of the city shall go into captivity. Where did the other half go? What would you do? Run? I'd be running. Yeah. But the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. There's a remnant there. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. He returns on the Mount of Olives. And his feet will actually be standing on the Mount of Olives. Now you can see how the armies turn against, because they know. They're going, who is this? What is this? And it says, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two. The actual Mount of Olives will be split in two, and there's a path that goes from there, from the east to the west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move to the north, and the other half toward the south. Then you shall flee through my mountain valley. That remnant, those people that can escape, this is how they're going to get out of Jerusalem, through this valley. Then you shall flee through my mountain valley, for the mountain valley shall reach to Azel. Yes, you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah the king. They had a terrible earthquake way back at Uzziah, and so the people, how did they flee? In a hurry. It isn't like, where do we go? There's only one path to go. But they do it in a hurry. They know what's happening behind them. They have to get out. It's terror. Thus the Lord my God will come, and as the scripture says, with all the saints with him. All the saints with him. Who is that? We just read in Revelation 19. It didn't say the saints were with him. He said he had an army. This fills in the blanks. It says, who is that army? His saints. His bride. They will come. Because it's not the angels' fight. The angels done their jobs before Christ comes. You can read all that in the rest of Revelation. But now, it's the king and his family, his bride, whatever you want to call it. He mentions 2 or 3 different things. But it's his saints, and they're going to come with this battle. And it shall come to pass in that day that there will be no light. Why would there be no light? It's cloudy. Could be. Could be a nuclear fallout. Because this will be a very bad time. Could it be so dark that the sun can't even shine? The lights will diminish, and it shall be one day, which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night. But at even time it shall happen that it will be light. Where's the light coming from? Jesus Christ is the light of the world. At that time, he's there. He's overseeing this. It defies all logic, all science. But even at night, that light is emanating from Him. And in that day, because this is going to happen in a day, and in that day it shall be that living water shall flow from Jerusalem, half of them towards the east and half towards the western sea. In both summer and water it shall occur. We read about that in other places, that water is going to come. And it's going to spring from Jerusalem. And it's going to go out this way, and it's going to go out that way. And everything it touches, and there's no longer going to be deserts. For the deserts will rejoice. It's going to be unbelievable. And it all starts to Christ, the center of the earth, where His kingdom will be in Jerusalem. And verse 9, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. That's what happens. That's His plan. In that day it shall be the Lord is one, and His name one. There's not going to be other kings. There's not going to be other religions. There is just Christ. He will teach, and His leaders will teach, and they will teach the whole world. First, He will have to bring peace, and then peace will have to be taught. And peace will be taught. He's called the Prince of Peace, because that's all He's ever wanted from the Garden of Eden. All the Word has ever wanted was peace. And it's been so fleeting. Even the time of Solomon was as much like his kingdom as the world has ever seen. But how long did that peace last? Not very long. I don't know what he could expect, being married to 1,000 women. He shouldn't expect peace. Ha ha. Don't send me letters over that. I was making a joke. Okay? I get replies on some of these videos of, how dare you, you're a sexist. Let's go to verse 10. All the land shall be turned into a plain from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be raised up and inhabited in her place from Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate and the corner gate, and from the tower of Hanel to the king's wine presses. The people shall dwell in it, and no longer shall there be utter destruction. Finally, peace. But Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. Has that ever happened? No. It's never happened. Hasn't happened in my lifetime. Matter of fact, if they have a few days of peace, that's kind of good. As a matter of fact, I won't have the guys turn there because it's a note in my Bible back here that I have that actually says, in the 3,400 years that we have record that we can depend on. We can't go back farther than 3,400 years. We don't have history. But of the 3,400 years, there have been 268 years of no war. That is a long time. So finally, there's going to be peace. And this is what's exciting about this. But how does this come about? We are actually going to be eyewitnesses, like Douglas was in the Civil War. We're going to be eyewitnesses to this. What happens when Christ comes with His army? Even Enoch predicted this with 10,000s of his saints. This has been predicted. But here's what happens in verse 12. And this shall be the plague which all the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. We see in another reference in Revelation, 200 million man army. Where's that going to come from today? That's just one side of the army. Could there be 1 billion? Wow. So what happens to them? Their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. This is the sword or the power that comes from Christ that it talks about in Revelation 19. He says the word and their faces, their body just dissolves. Anybody remember that movie with Harrison Ford? What was it called? Raiders of the Lost Ark. And you see that real freaky looking guy that he's standing there and he's got these glasses on and he's sweaty man and just not real likable. And so he's standing there and he looks at it. They say, don't look at the Ark of the Covenant. And he looks and it just melts. Everybody remember? I didn't want to show that because we have young kids here. I didn't want to. They've probably seen it more than I have, though. That's why they need to speak in a couple of weeks. But his face just melted. So I really wanted to know because this describes right here what it was like. And so I wondered, how did they do that? So I went and looked it up in Spielberg, and they actually made a wax head of him. Looked just like him, and then they melted it with a blowtorch. And that's why you see everything. But it says here, their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. They're ready to fight. And they just dissolve. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongue shall dissolve in their mouths. It's over that quickly. God doesn't torment people. That's not his purpose. He's a God of love. But sometimes he has to. Just like I'm sure these parents, they love their children, but sometimes you have to discipline. I always thought my parents enjoyed it. I found out later they didn't. But in my mind, but here, God doesn't, but this is, he's going to bring peace to this earth. It starts right here and it's going to take over the entire world. Let's go to the last place here to finish this story. Because now you see, it is our fight. The followers of God, bride of Christ, we will be in that battle. Will we have to do things? No. We're going to be there as a force, a show of an army coming there, but Christ just says that and boom, 500 million people are just melted. Hope somebody has a video camera there so they can show that this takes place. What actually takes place? Or do we need that? Go with me to Isaiah. Isaiah 66. Last verses today. Isaiah 66. And I will also turn over here just because I want to have that also. Isaiah 66 and verse 15. For behold, the Lord will come with fire. Okay. What's that? This adds to the story. You remember when the chariots came? Chariots of fire. I think there was a movie made about it because it's talking about Elijah when he gets on this chariot and they see fire, or you also see Isaiah talking about it and so forth. For behold, the Lord will come with fire and with his chariots. Is that us? I wouldn't mind a real nice chariot. Give me a good ride through the sky. With his chariots like a whirlwind, just like it's described in Elijah's time. To render his anger with fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword the Lord will judge all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. We already read that. But he does judge. Those, and here's what got me. This, I'm reading in the New King James Version here. This has got me because I really didn't grasp this. It says, those who sanctify themselves and purify themselves to go to the gardens. After an idol in the midst, eating swine's flesh, and the abomination and the mouse shall be consumed together, says the Lord. Well, wait a minute. What are they talking about? There's holy and there's not. So I had to go to the New Living Translation because I knew there was something here that I didn't get. And here's what it was. Let me read this from the New Living Translations. Those who consecrate and purify themselves in a sacred garden with its idol in the center, feasting on pork and rats and other detestable meats, will come to a terrible end, says the Lord. They were sanctifying themselves, saying, I'm holy. I can go here, I can worship, but no, it's to idol worship. This is what people were actually going to do that. And he said, that ain't going to go. That ain't going to go, folks. Verse 18, for I know their works and their thoughts. It shall be that I will gather all the nations in tongue, and they shall come and see my glory. After he's already destroyed the armies, the people are going to be there. They're going to come around and, what was this? Wow. And he said, I will set a sign among them and those among them who escape. They had to escape the city. But they also saw that something happened. I will send to the nations, to Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tubal and Javant, to the coastlands far away off, who have not heard of my fame nor seen my glory. Why these people are going to be sent out who have seen it. They're going to be able to attest to the glory of God and how everything has taken place on the day of the Lord. They're going out, and he wants them to tell, just like Henry Douglas told about the Civil War. He's sending people out to tell there's not going to be any war anymore. Everything is coming to be that Christ predicted, and he will set on his throne in Jerusalem. Have not heard of my fame nor seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. Then they shall bring all your brethren for an offering to the Lord of our nations, of all nations, on horses and on chariots and on litters and on mules and on camels, to my holy mountain Jerusalem. There's people they're going to come to see it, to hear it, however they can get there. Because they want to come. My holy mountain Jerusalem, says the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of the Lord. And I will also take some of them for priests and Levites. He's going to set up the Levitical priesthood again. You can read that in Revelation 7, where he seals 12,000 people from the tribe of Levi. Why? He's going to set up the Levitical priesthood again, so that people can learn that never knew anything about anything of the Bible. They're going to understand. Will it stay forever? I don't think so. Once people know and learn, but people have to learn. Because there will be two priesthood, the Levitical priesthood and the Melchizedek priesthood. Melchizedek priesthood is an everlasting priesthood. That's what the saints will be part of. And they will live forever, just like Melchizedek, who was a pre-incarnate Christ. Let me finish this up. Verse 22. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me. He's going to have to recreate the new heavens and the earth because of all the stuff that's gone down. And it's going to be beautiful this time. It's going to be like a Garden of Eden. So shall your descendants and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon, we're about to have a new moon. Whenever we have a new moon, you can't see the moon. Right? If you do, it's just this little piece. But from one new moon, because you're going to be able to tell time by the moons. And from one Sabbath to another, in the millennium, Sabbath's going to be kept. And you're going to come there. You're going to worship God, and you're going to know the times. All flesh shall come to worship before me. That's how there will be peace. All be of one mind. All be of one religion. One king. One law of justice, mercy, one of faith. Verse 24, and they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me. For their worm does not die, and their fire is not quenched, for they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. Why is that? Where do they come from? Came from the city of Jerusalem. They had a dump. It's where they burnt all the garbage. And it's where they threw all the skins of all the animals that they had sacrificed. And so it was outside the city. And this is where everybody came. And there against the wall were worms and maggots. And they wouldn't die. They just kept eating. And you know why they ate? Because of all the things that had to die. All the trash. And so until all the earth is purified, these maggots, these worms will continue to eat. But one day, all that's going to be gone. And everybody can come and look and see this is what the world that was conquered had to live by. This is what he wants us. And they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. So that enough people, the whole world will see, we don't want to live like that anymore. There's no reason to be death. There's no reason for people to die. And what does it say? In his kingdom, God will wipe away what? All tears. This is the most beautiful thing that he's offering. No more war. They shall not learn war anymore. What a beautiful scripture. What a beautiful time that all these young people in here can look forward to living in a world where there will be peace. Just as Isaiah describes it. So, hopefully the world will learn its lesson. For us, it's to watch for the 4 horsemen. But there's more than watch. We must make sure we are close to God. That he knows us and we know him. So that we will ride. We will ride with that 5th horseman. And we will be solving the world's problems. So they will never, ever have to have death ever again.